I am Jim Collison and live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on May 8th, 2018. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. This is a special BP10 edition of Call to Coach, and that is a resource for BP10 coaches, trained BP10 coaches, and educators who want to help others identify and develop their entrepreneurial talents. We have Gallup experts and independent BP10 coaches. In this case, we have the author of the book herself here today. And of course, this is to help maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions during this webcast, we have a live chat room that's available for you right below the main video window. Just bottom left-hand corner, choose log in, choose the guest account, take the name and guest number out, put your name in, and join us in the chat room. We'll be taking questions live. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strings solutions or BP10 solutions, in this case, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, or use the contact form right there on the live page. Don't forget to visit our newly redesigned and relaunched BP10 site. You can over to gallup.com/builder. Very easy to find. Again, gallup.com/builder. You can also catch the video on both streaming and downloadable audio for offline listening on our coaches blog. You can head over there, coaching.gallup.com. Todd Johnson is our host today. Todd's Gallup's channel leader for entrepreneurship and job creation. Todd, there needs to be the word builder in your title somewhere. Welcome back to this Call to Coach.
We keep building that title out, don't we? It occurs to me, I was reminiscing, Jim, we've done this now for a couple of years. I was coat and tie. I would spend the 2 and 3 days before the webcast preparing. I had teleprompters on both sides of the computer, and I'm feeling a little more casual. I think I'm feeling a little more comfortable and certainly more confident in what's happening. This movement, again, if I could somehow share my inbox today with you all, I think it'd be pretty exciting. There are conversations around the world around building and the talents required to build and rekindling the building spirit in communities, in companies. That's kind of an important one. Schools are talking about how to help their students prepare to build a great life. I've been in the prisons talking about building a future and rebuilding your future with the BP10. I mean, we are just across all segments, and especially the universities are all lighting up. So I don't know if I can articulate my excitement, but it's happening. Today is the launch day. I know this might date us on the recorded version, but May 8th of 2018 will be a day I think a lot of people remember. Super honored to have the co-author. She is the only person to co-author a book with our chairman, Mr. Jim Clifton. Her name is Dr. Sangeeta Badal. I have watched Sangeeta perform and research and share her knowledge all over the world. And we're just super excited that on a day like this, she's able to join us and take us through the last of the exercises in Board to Build. Of course, we started with self and know thyself and went through those exercises. So they'll be on a earlier version that's up on the website. They're going up literally in the next days. And then, of course, the opportunity identification and activation segments are also real important to this whole thing. But I'm going to contend, and Sangeeta might correct me in her opening remarks, but you save the best and most important for last. And this team conversation we're going to have today is critical. I've been studying startups and shoot ups and scale ups for decades. And you can almost always find the problem to growth in the team or in the team construct. So we have an exciting methodology and some activities that will help not guarantee, but certainly take some of the challenges out of getting the right teams in place. Because boy, when a team's all full of quarterbacks and there's nobody blocking or punting or kicking, they don't win. Sorry for the American football analogy, but hopefully it works. And you know the rule of my analogies, 50% is a good day. So with that, I will welcome my best friend at work and my partner and the soon-to-be best-selling author, Dr. Sangeeta Badal. Doctor, you're on.
Thank you, Todd. It is wonderful to be back with Jim and Todd and everyone out there who's listening to this. Very exciting day for us here at Gallup. I'm super excited about the release of our new book. I hope it helps every single one of you as you build your way forward. Let me start today, and Todd was right. We are talking about the team today. But before we jump into exactly what goes into the team building process, I'm just going to recap what we've talked about so far. What is this book really about? What we are offering you here in this book goes beyond the conventional business training and focuses a, on a very specific and uniquely psychological approach to building a venture. Um, the last three podcasts that we've had, we've discussed the tools and techniques that we've brought forth to help builders get something going, get it off the ground, to start something from scratch, or to build new products in existing businesses. We've brought together psychological aspects that go into building a sustainable and successful venture, which we call the talent approach. We have paired that with the scientific methodology of building something. And I'm sure many of you know that the scientific method, which is all about you start with a problem, you state a hypothesis, you launch an experiment, you evaluate the evidence, which either supports or negates your hypotheses. It's a 500-year-old science. It is a method that was developed to really get to the answers of big problems and find solutions in a way that is measurable, that is scientific in its approach, and we get evidence to say that something works or not. We apply the principles of that scientific method to the process of building a venture. I mean, many of you are familiar with the lean approach, which is based on the agile engineering methodology. Um, Many of you might also be aware of the customer development process that Steve Blank has come up with, effectuation that Saraswati came up with. So, what we've done is we've taken these best practices uh, based on that whole scientific approach and brought it together, married it to the talent or the psychological approach, which we will continue to discuss today. We're using that psychological understanding of the people who are involved in this activity as a team. So that's what we'll focus on today. But I just wanted to make sure that we touch on what is the overarching message of the book. What is it that we set out to do, and how did we bring it together? So there you go. That's what we've tried to do. Today is the last piece of that puzzle, and that is about building a team that is very much focused on identifying and understanding the talent of individuals that create that team that comes together to build a venture. Uh, we many a times we think about the process of building something as this guided or started by an individual who comes up with an idea, and then that person develops that idea and activates on it and builds something. Now that's that image of someone who has this combination of grit and determination and has the ability to sustain him or herself through long days, hours, or years of that development process, and then becomes successful, is really good in terms of the storytelling, but not really in touch with the reality. Turning an idea into a product or service actually requires a web of direct ties and indirect ties that the team members bring to the table. And that's what we are going to talk about today. So, direct ties are people who are in our family, people who are our colleagues, people who are in the immediate circle around the individual. And then the indirect ties are the extended networks the individual has. So these could be investors and suppliers and mentors, employees in a large organization, or or the larger community in which that entity is being built. So the connections that the builder brings to the venture brings along resources, sources of information, different perspectives and opinions, and that is what makes that um, then possible to build something from scratch. The benefits of having a diverse network or bringing all these other people into the building process is that the involvement and commitment of the members of your network can shape not only the initial product or service that you're building, but it can open new markets, it can broaden your horizons, it can improve the venture's ability to be sustainable, to survive the uncertainties of the market or the uncertainties of the environment. And that then makes it sustainable and also makes it uh, the likelihood of being successful increases much more when you have a strong team rather than a solo founder who's trying to do all that.
Can I just interrupt, because you've hit on a word that really buzzes me up, and it's diversity. And we're talking about companies today, but I'm gonna, most know I'm an economist, and I kind of take a look at the world and think about what that means as well. If we want to think about our economic development as a country, over the last couple hundred years, and the word diversity and immigration, I think it's related and important. I gave a speech once on, diversity as it relates to economy building. We're today talking about company or venture building, but you can just look around the world. I'm looking at a global map now, and you can see the countries that are the most diverse, be it ethnicity or be it gender or be it talent, those or religion or et cetera. They've done the best. It's just that simple. So, it's not only the right thing to do, but it's the right thing to do for the shareholder and the stakeholder. We can take the same historical lens to the world's economic growth as we can to a company's economic growth. So,
Absolutely.
Bravo on the word diversity. Keep using it. It's a great word.
Yes, and it is so applicable. Whether you're talking about, and you just talked about the country level or the company level, you can take it down to right down to the team level, and
Yeah,
diversity
boom.
is still that important because of all the benefits that accrue to that. Usually, when people start looking for their team members, it is not unusual to tap into your immediately direct eyes. So you want to pick someone who's similar to you because you're comfortable and you have similar skills, similar backgrounds, work experience, your demographic characteristics are the same, whether it's age, gender, or race or ethnicity. And there are benefits to a homogenous team, and it reduces, for instance, the likelihood of conflict. It creates social and emotional support, makes it easier to access resources for an early stage venture. But homogeneous teams also have their limits. They limit the builders access to a wider variety of resources, and they could be both human, financial, or other. And new information, for instance, is harder to access if you have people who are very similar to each other and with very similar outlooks and very similar ways of decision making or thinking process. So, as much as homogeneity has its benefits, I think diversity, as Todd had mentioned, really brings the game up a couple of notches. So, there are two types of diversity, of course: the functional diversity, which is related to the competencies a person has or the work experiences that people bring to the teams. And the more functional diversity you have, the higher the likelihood that you will be able to tackle a problem or look at the problem through different lenses, which then makes it much easier to find the solutions that would work on the ground. And then there is the cognitive diversity, which is different ways of thinking or tackling problems. So the work experience counts to it, but also the person's thought process also makes a difference. And so it's important to have that diversity in a team to really make it successful. Now let's look at this example that you have in front of you, and I think Jim has already placed it on the screen. This is the team talent map tool, and what you see here is an early stage venture in the financial industry with three members. So these are the three co-founders who got together to start this company about 5 years ago. This actually is a real world example from a team that we have spoken to and have consulted with here in Omaha, Nebraska. There are three members: Amrita, Jordan, and Blanca. These names, of course, have been changed so that the privacy of the individuals and the company can be maintained. And you can see that there are two rainmakers on this team. Amrita and Jordan are both rainmakers, which gives you an idea of two highly self-confident individuals who are very persuasive in their style, focused on profitability, very forward-thinking, love to be the face and name of the company, high sales talent, and very optimistic perception of risk. So those are some of the characteristics that they share. And then there is Blanca, who's the expert. She is a coder or a programmer extraordinaire and has amazing amount of focus and determination that keeps her um, clunking away at building this product in the financial industry. When you look at this team, and we'll talk about what are some of their issues that they're trying to tackle, but when you look at this team, you immediately see that it's well equipped with two rainmakers, as we said before. There is an expert who's focused on product development, but it really lacks a conductor. So we'll talk about how they will go about fulfilling that gap. So that's the first gap that they have, as you can see immediately. Looking at their top four talents, let's see what other things they're strong at and what gaps do they have. So Amrita and Jordan, as is not surprising, share three of their four top four. So confidence, selling, and determination is very strong for both of them. What Amrita lacks in profit or looking at profitability, she actually makes up with a very sharp eye for mitigating risk or having that ability to manage risk. And what Jordan lacks in his ability to take risks, he makes up for this very, very keen eye on the bottom line of the company, which is his profitability. So you can see that even though they have very similar profiles, they still bring different things to the table. And then you have Blanca, who is very creative from her disruptor, very determined to get the product built which the customer needs. Also has a relationship which actually she doesn't ever get to use because she's always behind the scenes. And she also has delegators. She can be a good manager. um, so Quantum Pro has been in existence for 5 years. They've weathered a few storms in their day. And this is the first time that they won $1 million commitment from an investor. So now they actually have an investor who's an influential figure in the financial industry on board. And that individual has brought along tons of contacts and advice and resources, but this person has also made life a little complicated for this really tiny startup. So one of the things that complicates things for them now is that this little company, this tiny startup, has to set up a board of directors, which of course would be made up of the investor, the three founders. So there are these four members. They do need to bring one external person that is acceptable to both parties. So the investor as well as the co-founders have to approve this fifth person who has to be added to the board. So that's one requirement that they have. This is one thing they need to accomplish as part of their to-do list in the near future. The company is also considering hiring its first employee. And that is because of the increased volume of new prospects that are coming in. So they're getting more inquiries, they're getting more, they're making more sales, and the customers are looking at them in terms of providing the service that they provide in the financial industry. So they do now need an additional person so that Blanca's um, burden or role can shift more to the strategic development of the product and service rather than the day-to-day building that product. So she needs help in terms of their first hire. Um, the investor is really pushing the team to have a very clear organizational structure with very well-defined job functions. So this is the perfect time for them to clear up or clarify their roles. Now, as you all can imagine, in a startup, in the early days of startup, everyone does about everything that needs to be done to keep that boat afloat. Um, you you start with any role from the beginning of your day to the end of the day. things change multiple times during the day. So you're the person who answers the phone, you're the person who interacts with the customer, you're the person who makes the sale, you're the person who's looking at the product design, you're looking at the positioning of the product, the marketing, the everything that has to be done. And these three have a little bit of role definition, in the sense that Blanca was or is focused primarily on building the product, but still they have all shared the responsibilities as and when things had to be taken care of. However, now that a structure is required, Quantum Pro is thinking about who is the best fit for which role in this company. And because Amrita is the person who came up with the idea of this product and established or started the business, she also is the biggest shareholder. She sees herself as the rainmaker slash CEO of this company. She loves to be the face of the company. She loves to interact with customers. She has a very good sense of who the customer is and how to increase the the market size, and the footprint of the company in the financial industry. And being the majority shareholder, she assumes that is going to be her role. Blanca, clearly, as we said before, is the expert, so she's completely focused on building that product and has nothing to do with the day-to-day management. She's giving up even things that she used to step in to help, because she really wants to focus on the strategic development of the product. Now that gets to a very interesting position that Jordan is in. He is a rainmaker in terms of what he likes to do and what he's done along with Amrita for the last 5 years. But the situation is such that even though you have two highly talented rainmakers pursuing revenue growth and profitability, it's a strategy that was really beneficial for them in early stages, but now needs a little bit more clarity in terms of role definition. They both do not need to be doing the same thing as they were doing before. And so, what we advised Quantum Pro team was to clearly identify the chain of command, divide decision making and responsibilities between Amrita and Jordan to avoid any future complications. We suggested that Jordan may want to focus more on the financial, legal, and product decision making side. That is, decisions regarding the product, the price, the promotion, the distribution channel, etc., while Amrita takes a more outward facing role, like fundraising and sales and positioning the company in the market. So having a discussion about the talents, having a discussion about the blind spots. We already talked about one blind spot, and it's a very visible one. They don't have a conductor. When we spoke to the team, all three of them, Amrita very dramatically said that I'd rather kill myself than manage the paperwork and to hire staff and to figure out how to systematize our processes, because that's just not me. I don't want to do that. I have no time for it. I have no talent for this. So they've kept the flag flying high with their high determination, but now it's time to start looking at that gap of, we need a conductor. The other gap that they noticed as we were in discussions with them about their team profile is that you can see here on their top four talents, they really lack relationship building talent. Now, as I had said before, Blanca does have that in her top four, but remember, she's never in front of the client. So her relationship building talent can be utilized in building an internal team that is focused on product development, but not so much in terms of an outward facing, an industry facing relationship expert that they need. So they realize that they do need to cultivate relationships with individuals who have a deep knowledge of the financial industry, specifically the technology sector within the financial industry, and they want someone who's an influencer in that industry, so that uh, the product can be brought out to a larger community. So the team decides that they need someone who can aggressively promote their product outside of their existing network. So that is the second need that they have. The the founders have decided to move outside of their current networks to recruit a fifth board member, someone who has a strong relationship, as well as the promoter part of the selling talent. So, someone who can literally be the person who speaks on behalf of the company to the larger industry, financial industry. So looking at their own roles, their top four talents of the individuals that are part of this team, they have determined that they need to have someone who can fill those potential gaps. Gap of a conductor who can manage the business and grow it and scale it, and number two, bring on someone who's more a relationship and outward facing promoter kind of talent on the team. Now, as we've walked you through this example, there is a template on uh, that helps you then utilize it with the teams you consult with. If you're building a team, if you're advising a team, I think this can help you see things from a perspective of talent, identify the roles that the individuals bring to the table, what he or she would be good at, and what are the gaps in their profile. And I'm not talking about profile of the individual, but more a profile of the team. What are the gaps in the profile of the team that need to be filled so that they can actually take care of certain things that have to be done in the business? So the problems that they have in the business should be solved, keeping in mind the makeup of the team, of who can do what well, and where do you need to actually buffer and make up for some of the things that are missing on the team, and make sure that all this that is done should be done keeping in mind the business problem. So keep the business problem always at the center before you start looking at who can and who can't do this, and how they would need to bring in other people to really round out the team. So that's okay. One more thing. I think decoding each other's personality, and this is a learning we had from talking to Quantum Pro team. Um, each one of them, of course, was high ego, high self assurance, and had been working together for 5 years, doing everything that needed to be done in the team. But decoding each other's personality made it much easier for them to make sense of each other's actions and thought processes. So you could hear that in our conversations with them of, oh my gosh, now I understand why you do what you do. You know, sometimes we are not on the same page, which is not unusual among team members, but this just fosters that understanding, fosters the empathy and the connection and acceptance among the team members. So they begin to understand each other, which then creates a psychologically safe and supportive environment for the team to function in. And remember that Jordan's position, which wasn't very clear on the team, it was a very sensitive issue for the Quantum Pro team. So sometimes when you have these kind of sensitive issues of who's going to do what and how do you assign tasks or roles on a team, then having this psychologically safe environment in which to operate really makes things much easier for the team. And they can, instead of breaking down in terms of communication, in terms of understanding, this actually fosters having an open and free conversation where people think like, we are in this together. We need to make this thing work together. And that can happen when you move from a talent based perspective and you highlight what are the strengths the individual has, and then what are some of the gaps that are in our makeup. So just to cap it up, or cap this part of our podcast today, I would say that what you have in front of you, the tool that you have here, marries the functional requirements of the role, that is the demands that builders have to meet, with the insights into the talents needed to fulfill those demands. And I think that marriage is really, really important to build a team that is successful and sustainable. So that's the first part of it. Let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah,
Before
Sangeeta, we do from the chat room. There's kind of a question around, again, back to this comes from David in the chat room. We go back to the EP 10 days, and we're kind of using an example of a startup or a small company doing this. How does this translate if we're doing this internally, or we're building a new project inside an existing organization? What kind of advice would you give? Because as I look at the tool, I'm thinking of doing this with my own webcasting team, is to sit down and build this through and help identify some things. We would probably list Clifton strengths right next to it. Was this top 4 talents? We would probably list those and list the Clifton strengths right next to it, which would be great. But what kind of recommendations would you give about internal teams using these tools to build products that may be emerging out of organizations, so to speak?
Great question. I think any team inside an existing organization, or a team that, in this case, the example shows of something that these co-founders had started from scratch, it would use the same principle. So basically, you're still trying to create a best functioning team by combining the personality of the members with the right mix of skills and work experiences. The higher the congruence between the skills, experiences, and talents or personality of the individuals, the stronger the team's performance. And so use the same principles to identify what are the roles that you need on the team, what are the tasks that have to be done, what is your business problem that you're trying to solve. And once you keep that at the center, then put together a team that has a representation of all the 10 talents across the board. It is not going to happen with one person. So you have to account for those 10 talents. You have to look to different people who bring those talents to the table. And then you identify the blind spots, you identify the gaps, and keep in mind that you're always tying that to the business problem, because that's where the strength of this exercise is, in terms of making sure you're solving your business problems based on understanding who are the people who are involved in this, and how would they be thinking, and what is their decision making process. And that then brings together the team in a cohesive way.
Yeah, and I don't see a lot of difference, Todd. Maybe you can even talk to this as well. I don't see a ton of difference once you get the process going, with the exception of funding, maybe, and maybe a different style board. I don't see too many differences in that building process of still measuring, marking, setting out goals, understanding your gaps in there, even on those internal teams. And I think it's even more important. It may be easier for internal teams to find funding, but it may not be. You may be in a situation where you're shoestringing an internal project, right? Yeah. And you got to figure out ways to get that done. Todd, you want to add?
I can just guarantee you from both internal and external working on this, that it's a lot more similar than different in terms of an internal startup. There's somebody watching project numbers and costs and payroll and financials, whether it's you or someone else. I just guarantee, if it's a healthy company, someone is. I think an important point, and it applies to each of these 8 different exercises, is the power of intentionality and the power of writing it down. We just simply know at Gallup, having researched this over decades, things happen in a much more intentional way when it's written down. And that goes, anybody that's been through a Gallup class stands up and writes down their commitments at the end. It's not just fun. That's research that says it's a good thing. So I think there are teams all over this ecosystem and all over this world that are grappling with these issues without the structure, and maybe without the third party and the research-based influence. Sangeeta, that was one of the best descriptions of an exercise I've ever heard. I think the word safe was an important one. People are protective, especially the originator or the owner or the ideator who came up with it, but giving them safe environments that have, independent research and external, maybe coaches or mentors or teachers or parents or investors. The structure and intentionality is a good thing. Those would be my remarks.
And I've seen some internal projects that aren't documented this well. And it, and a lot of times they need
I've been part of a lot of those.
Yeah, you're starting these internal projects and you need this documentation to push it forward.
Yeah.
I think if you work through these worksheets, you've got a lot of what you need to be able to roll forward. Sangeeta, David also mentions nonprofit, and I think that's an area sometimes where we treat them a little bit different. I'm not so sure we should, right? The same processes, right?
And let me bring up a point. If you have time, go in and watch Dr. Bev Crocker's video on our website, because she talks specifically about teams, and she's building a nonprofit called the Business Ethics Alliance. I was on that board for 10 years and watched it very deeply struggle with these exact issues. And right now we're quite honestly in search of our rainmaker, because we've got so much expertise and management and conductor talent. It's awesome, but next level needs the rain. So I think the only difference between a nonprofit and a profit is your tax relationship with the government. In terms of fundamental management and people and human development, bingo, right on the exact same train. I've had people come to me and say, well, the profit orientation doesn't matter because I'm nonprofit. They're broke, and whatever their mission is over, because I guarantee the donor jungle will eat them alive if they don't operate like a business. Your tax structure with your government is between you and your accountants, but the management techniques are exactly the same.
Yeah. Sangeeta, you want to add anything to that?
I totally agree. I think the issues are the same. You might not have the pressures of showing profitability, but you do have pressures of sustaining the nonprofit and going after those grants that are becoming rarer and rarer. And to raise the funding, you have to be able to identify for the investor what is it, or in this case mostly grants that are given by foundations, of what is the difference that what you are offering in the market makes from the 1,000 other nonprofits in the same space. And you have to sell, you have to be the promoter, you have to raise funding, you have to make sure that you stay within the budget when you do get the grant to operate your nonprofit. So the principles are exactly the same as Todd mentioned. In fact, sometimes it's even harder than a for-profit business that goes and finds customers. It's harder for nonprofits to continue to be sustainable.
I'm in an Omaha civic group that is doing a lot of work around STEM and STEM education here in the city of Omaha. We are applying for a lot of grants through the Gates Foundation. And by the way, this is some of the pieces that they want. Like there's homework associated with it.
50 years ago, if you had a good mission, somebody'd write you a check. Today, you have to show a real business, impact to customers, ROI. All the traditional business metrics are alive and well in the nonprofit donor world.
Yeah,
on both sides of it.
There's a great question there. The last couple questions on this form, right? Is there a business problem that you're trying to solve? How will you use your team's strengths to reach a solution? And then who almost would you need on your team? And I think that's such a valuable, like, for teams to start dreaming about their next ads and what they need to be looking for in that ad coming to the team based on their gaps.
That's a perfect segue.
I think it's really, really important. Yeah. So Sangeeta, you want to take that and run with it?
Absolutely. This is perfect to move into that building of an extended team part of this exercise. So there is research that indicates that builders proactively employ strategies that enable them to cross their immediate boundaries, social boundaries, and build very diverse networks. And they could be building something with customers, they could be building alliances with their investors, as you saw what Quantum Pro is doing, with their suppliers, other strategic partners, to reduce that uncertainty in the environment, to reduce that the unknown of what the market offers, and to acquire resources to bring those ideas to market. So what we're going to talk about in this section is how do you leverage your direct and indirect ties? And as I had mentioned before, direct ties are your personal networks. So the immediate, that is the network that is closest to you. If you can think about concentric circles, these are the circles right around the core team that is going after building a product or a service. And then you have people who are out of your immediate social network, and these are the indirect ties. So these are people who you're going to connect to using some bridges. So people within your direct circle, your immediate circle, are some of those people can become the bridging ties between you and the outside world or the extended network. And that's what we'll talk about. So what you see on the screen here, of course, is a diagram that shows that the Quantum Pro team, which is Amrita, Blanca, and Jordan, which is the immediate team, and then you have their immediate connections, which are the closest to them. So for Amrita, it is Kelly. For Blanca, it's Steve or Gina, and for Jordan, it is professor, one of his professors, or Dr. Archer. And what they're doing is they're again looking at what business problems they have to solve. What is it that Quantum Pro needs help with? They are looking to their immediate network to connect them to outsiders who can then help them solve those issues, or who can help get them the resources they need. So for instance, we talked about one of the issues that Quantum Pro has is they have a need to hire their first employee because they want to lessen the load that Blanca carries at this point, as the product needs much more development and refining and getting it out to the customers as the customer pipeline is filling up. So for that, to fill that gap in the team talent profile, Blanca reaches out to Steve, who is actually her brother and is a college recruiter. And what Steve is going to do is he's going to refer a programmer to them. So the commitment is that Steve, who's a college recruiter, is going to put forth three potential candidates to interview for the role of software developer. There is a timeline, there is an outcome. So as much as you can intentionally, as Todd loves to say, intentionally put these things down, write them down in terms of what is it that the business is looking for, and who in your immediate network can help you accomplish that particular goal, and what is the timeline for that goal, and what is the outcome you're looking for. Really really helps keep the ball moving, helps to accomplish tasks and keep on track with the commitments from each member of your personal network. Um, Now, once and there are other examples of that. You can see how Blanca is reaching out to her college roommate, and also Jordan, who's reaching out to a professor because they need expertise in network theory. They're trying to leverage the principles of network theory to increase the reach of their social network piece of their service that they offer to the financial industry customers. So these are examples of how to get in touch with your direct ties to get specific business problems answered. And then you also start looking for the bridging ties in your immediate network. And bridging ties are people who can connect you to the information and resources that you need, whether they are human, financial, or others. For instance, information based on their own personal and work relationship. So basically, you're just moving now from your immediate circle to the next concentric circle, to the next circle. And here is an example again from Quantum Pro, where they found their first big investor through Amrita's college roommate who made personal introductions. So you see under the indirect tie, which is the tie strength, 2A, which is Amrita who connects to Kelly, that is her immediate social network. And then Kelly connects Amrita to Rick Lead, who becomes the investor and a financial advisor to this little startup. And they were seeking a minimum of 1 million, which they were able to get. The timeline that they had set for themselves in terms of bringing someone on board as an investor was 3 months, um, which they did or they didn't meet. Is you can update these tables as you're making inroads into trying to find that person who could become part of that board and an investor. Another indirect tie is the professor who brought the expertise of network theory becomes a bridging tie to another board member who is an industry expert. So you now have access through your immediate, through your direct ties, you have access to people outside of your immediate social network. So you bring in an industry expert. And again, through the indirect ties, Blanca, who looks to her immediate tie, Gina, who brings in a potential COO or the operations person that the quantum pro team needs. So, uh, what this does is it allows you to not only fill the gaps in the team in terms of solving those business issues, but then also keeping always in mind what is the kind of person you want. So, for instance, the one individual that they are bringing in as software developer, they knew already that we need someone who's a excellent programmer. That's the basic necessity for this particular role, of course. But they also wanted specific talents that could round out the team and be the perfect fit with the existing team. So they needed someone who has a lot of independence, which is someone who's a jack of all trades, who can pitch in to help when needed. Remember, this is still a very small team. They're just 3 founders and 1 investor. So they needed someone who can pitch in, even though their role would be a programmer role, but someone who can take up other things when needed. And also, independence allows a person to run. That's not a person who needs too much managing and hand holding and being told again and again what needs to be done. So they need someone who can very quickly get up to speed and is a quick learner and just runs out the gate with the charge that is given to that person. They needed someone who has very high knowledge. So, someone who can gather information about the latest technological advances in the financial industry. They really needed someone who has this desire to learn more and more and more about the role that he or she is in. It's not just enough to bring a programmer who can just deliver what he or she is told to do, but someone who can actually search for what is going on and what is the latest in the field. And then they need someone who is as creative as Blanca has been in this role, someone who can be a perfect partner to Blanca in creating these new products. Remember, they are still early stage. They still need to innovate a lot. They still need to give customers what they need. They need to continuously refine that product, which we talked about in the activation of that whole experiment, gather data, make the necessary changes, go back into the field, which is go back to your customers, offer them what they wanted, and see if that still meets their needs, or you still have to go through the entire circle of experimentation, data collection, analysis, and look at the evidence. So regularly update this team map. You start with your initial business problems and you look at your immediate ties, and then you look for the extension of those ties into the outside of your social networks. But then you regularly update this is not a one time exercise, because obviously the needs of the business or the needs of your team are ongoing. So as your team expands, pay attention to um, how do you develop the team culture? How do you articulate your vision for the team? How do you establish priorities? How do you communicate clearly and tirelessly of what exactly do you want and what everyone should know about the company on the team, so that you can deliver the highest quality work to your customers. The customers could be people like, for Todd and I, sometimes customers, we work in a company, but our customers can be internal customers or they can be external customers. Whatever the case may be, the end goal is for that team to be functioning smoothly and delivering what the customer needs. And I'm going to stop here and see if you have more questions.
I'm going to just make a commentary because I can't help it. I think this is one of the most underdeveloped aspects of startup or internal new product growth. There are a tremendous amount of experts out there that would love to help. They've never been asked. And the team is usually so focused on their immediate day or their immediate problems, the expressions, their heads are down, building their product, building their company. They need to absolutely look up beyond that first concentric circle. I think nonprofits oftentimes, lean a little heavy on their boards being just donors, and the checks are important, but there's also critical expertise that comes with that, maybe without a check. And I think there can be much more systematic, I'm going to say intentionality around finding those concentric circles of support. And I guess my final remarks would be, I rarely, because I do this maybe not as in writing as I should, but it's very rare that someone says, no, I won't help. I mean, that's just not part of the national, or I'll even say the international dialogue. People want to help. They need to know how to be asked and thanked. And, but I think the startups and the existing companies could all probably get a little better with their, I'm going to say the indirect ties. The direct ties is happening and it's natural, but, and indirect, and how many indirects can you add, before something gets solved? So I think the sequencing of know thyself up to know thy circles has been really smart. And I know that's the sequence in the book, and it's a very smart book, which launched today, I might add. And we've sold a lot of copies since this webinar. My phone's lighting up. Dr. Badal, thank you so much for taking us through all 8 of these. Are you going to put it to questions, Jim, or is that?
Yeah, I've got one more big question in this, and Sangeeta, to you, how important is the coaching role? We've trained a bunch of coaches to be able to do this. We have some training that folks can come to be a BP10 coach, so to speak. When you think about the player of a coach, and this group in particular, talk a little bit about the value you see in that, and how can a coach really kind of change the chemistry of a team to be able to push them forward?
I think Todd referred to this a little bit. Sometimes we are so focused as a team to get the task done, to get through the day, to get to the goals that the team has set for themselves, that it is hard to leverage the advice or the help from people who might be able to look at the entire situation from a little bit of a distance, but in an objective way. And so that's, I think, where the role of a coach or an advisor can really click in, because this is, again, it might be someone, a coach or a mentor is in someone's direct ties, and that is how the person was, or the expertise was leveraged on the team. But it could also be that you've got to, you're not part of the immediate circle, but maybe a circle twice removed, or in the extended arena. The role of a coach would be to help the team or guide the team through the process, to hold them accountable, to make sure that this is one type of template. I'm sure we have amazingly creative coaches who can come up with their own templates too, of jotting down these things that the team has to accomplish, and then holding them accountable for that. I think advising them, holding them accountable, making sure, looking at something from an outsider's perspective would really, really enrich the functioning of that team.
Todd, you want to add anything to that?
I would just, I'm thinking about my coaching business, and I would, I'd pull these down from the website and have them as attachments to a proposal saying, this is what we're going to do, every month or bi-monthly, and put a 3-year plan on it. And I mean, that's why we put them up there. We want them being utilized. And I could see now some are going to be more important to some companies than others. That's why we put them in modules. There's not one methodology. There's 8 different steps to this building methodology. But I would, I'd get these in proposals all over my customer base tomorrow, because I think other coaches, I know some are, and it's working.
Yeah, and I think everybody needs a coach, both internally and externally. We talk about this on the Clifton Strength site a lot, but this is a critical process when we think about what we're doing and how we're moving forward. And leaning into this without a outside advisor can be very, very difficult. And I know sometimes small groups of individuals inside or outside an organization, a little hesitant to bring in that outsider, or don't want to necessarily make that expense, but it kind of needs to be done. If you're going to do this, you kind of need to lean into it.
Yeah.
and really make the investments that are necessary to have that outside counsel to make sure you're getting the right kind of advice. And I just can't tell you, the most valuable advice I've ever gotten is always from the outside, who's not living in that space, who can kind of say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you completed that? We've seen experience over here. So I think really, really valuable. We got a whole team of coaches that have trained around this. And so if you're listening to this for the first time, we've got some coaches. Todd, I'm sure, can make some great recommendations for individuals out there if you're thinking of jumping in. Just a great way to engage someone to help you along this process.
Here's my close. If you expect to be ignorant and free, you expect what shall never be. That applies to this module. Somebody should write that down.
Right on. Sangeeta, anything else before we wrap it?
Well, I've just really enjoyed this interaction, talking about things that, of course, are very close to our heart and we've worked hard to develop, but also to have your questions, to try to answer them. And that interaction is really, really enjoyable for me. So thank you so much.
Good. And we'll remind individuals, if you do have questions, you're watching this, maybe recorded a different time, maybe it's 2019 or 2020, and you're thinking about, hey, I got this question, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. That email will always get to us. There is, if you want to leave us a question on the site, on the live site where you're listening, there is a contact form right there on the page. If you want to be able to do that in, maybe, put BP10 in the subject line so we kind of know where to route it. And that information will get over to Sangeeta or to Todd. And we'd love to have your questions. We can't answer everything in an hour-long webcast, but we want to thank you for coming out and join us. If you are interested, I mentioned that BP training. It's available right now. Clifton Strength Summit is coming up July 16th, 17th, 18th. I think there's training, Todd, right? On either end of that, there's some BP10
bookends, and they're going to sell out. We've got some great people signing up. It's going to be cool.
15% off right now. Head over to cliftonstrengthsummit.com and you can get in on those either end. I get a big questions all the time about, is there any additional training coming? Those will be announced as we maybe get to during or after the summit as we look out ahead on our calendar. Don't forget, we got a Facebook group around this as well. If you'd like to join in the conversation, you can go out to facebook.com/BP10. That will get you there, and you can join that group and have this conversation. We want to thank you for joining us again. This is part 4 of a 4-part series, and so if you haven't listened to 1, 2, and 3, you can find them over at our site. Head over to gallup.com/builder, and they will be, not this second, but they will be posted there.
The resources.
They will be, yes, they'll be posted there shortly. And Todd reminded us those resources are posted on that same site after you've taken the assessment. When you log in, those resources become available for you. So if you haven't done that yet, head over there, take the assessment, get those results, and you'll have access to all these resources. We want to thank you for joining us today. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.